lot of the skills that comics have to learn, I think jazz sort of taught me very early on.
Sound?
Bite me. Quick sound bite.
Bite me. Bite me, bite me, bite me, bite me.
Okay, I'll bite.
Mentally, 47 years. Physically, I started, so let's see, it was 2009. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't a theater guy. It's funny, with theater, I did a play my senior year, but there was a structure to how things ran in high school. You know, you take all the theater classes, and then when you're a junior, you have a shot at getting like a bigger part in a play. When you're a senior, you have a shot at like the lead or whatever. I never took a theater class, but I had a good friend who did and really liked the theater, and he moved away his junior year, and we were all kind of bummed that like, oh, I guess we're not going to go get to see our friend in the play anymore. And I had another friend who was like, you should audition. And I was like, I've never taken a theater class. She's like, you should still try it. And like an idiot, I auditioned for the lead of the play my senior year, and I ended up getting it. So all the theater kids hated me. They really hated me because they're like, I've been studying my whole career for this. I don't blame them for being mad at me, but in terms of comedy, there's a long story and a short story. One day I was like driving home with a friend from school in high school, and I was like ranting about traffic signs or something, and she was laughing, and she was like, who says that? What comedian says that? Right. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm just making that up right now. And she's like, you didn't steal that from a comedian? I was like, no, I just made it up. And she's like, oh my God, you should do stand-up comedy. And then I basically just tried. I was like, oh, okay. And then just tried it. I went to into my friend's backyard because at the time in Fresno, there were no shows, nothing at all. I didn't know, I'd never been to a live comedy show. I only knew Comedy Central and like these big, HBO specials and stuff like that. So in my head, this idea of a 5-minute spot, it just didn't even make sense to me. So in my head, every comedian does an hour, right? Or about 45 with commercials. So my first time doing stand-up, I did 45 minutes because I thought that's just what you do. That's just, you know what I mean? So I wrote 45, and honestly, like, it made it a lot easier for when I moved to LA and I started doing comedy regular, because they were like, it's a 5-minute spot or a 3-minute spot. And right. Like, well, out of 45 minutes, which, granted wasn't amazing material by any means, I had a decent 3 once I took away all the stuff, once I picked my best jokes from that 45. So it made it easier to kind of start out at that point, because I had a lot to mine from. Yeah, technically, that was back in 2000. I was actually 17 when I did that show, and I thought my career was over. I was like, just doing it for fun, and it's funny looking back because I made a couple of my friends open for me. One of my friends, I was like, yeah, you just do like 20, and he's like, this is really hard. And I'm like, you're just doing 20. I'm doing 45. None of us had ever done comedy in our life. Yeah. We all studied it. You know what I mean? Even if we didn't we weren't reading books on how to do stand-up comedy. We did it somehow, like everyone, the classic story is being the funny sibling, having older siblings and win them over with it's all like a form of studying, even if we weren't aware that that's what we were doing. I was actually the quiet kid, to be honest. Me too. But I always did have a strong sense of humor, and for me, it wasn't even like growing up with stand-up as much. For me, it was a lot of like comedy movies and National Lampoons and like the Looney Tunes even, and the Pee Wee Herman and stuff like that I kind of attribute to more than stand-up. I did sign myself up, and I remember they referred to me as 2 years and under. Like they had a group of comedians who had been doing comedy for 2 years and under, and because there was like a show of that, and then the winner of that moved on to the rest of the competition or something like that. So I'm not sure the exact year. It must have been like 2010. I was probably 1 year in or something. So I would have been, either, depending on what month it was, either, 18 or 19 years old at that point. Yeah. So yeah, kind of a long story. We were sort of this, bench warmer crew of ragtag jazz kids who didn't know what they were doing and didn't know anything about jazz, and ended up winning a bunch of awards and being really good at that. And so that's what taught me how to perform live. But more importantly than that, because I won a couple of them, but one specifically sort of big award for me was winning it was like best soloist of a whole festival. So it was out of like 1,000 musicians. And it taught me that writing something in my bedroom, which is where I wrote that solo out, could translate to being performed in front of a bunch of people, and that people would like it. And I know, like, to some maybe who don't do comedy, like hearing that, it's like, well, how do you get comedy out of jazz? It's like there's a lot of similarities, and I think that taught me a lot of the important lessons that comics take their first few years to learn right out of the gate. Because I had been doing that kind of stuff, performing, editing, writing, being able to also improvise at the same time. A lot of the skills that comics have to learn, I think jazz sort of taught me very early on. And funny enough, I ended up reading a book years later about Billy Crystal, and he said almost the exact same thing. His dad owned like a record store that specialized in jazz music, and he always felt like his appreciation for jazz music is what taught him how to do comedy. And I was like, I've said the same thing for years. Yeah, DryBar is sort of the new form of doing stand-up specials. Not that we've moved away from Netflix, obviously, or HBO or anything like that, but this whole idea of doing a special that's not necessarily in one place is kind of a new idea that's kind of taking over comedy. That this special isn't necessarily released on just drybar.com or whatever. It's drybarcomedy.com, whatever. It's on Peacock, it's on YouTube, it's on DryBar's streaming platform. And I got in kind of on the somewhat earlier end of them doing specials. And another really long story of how I got it. But essentially, I basically said yes to doing a festival pretty early on. I won't say the name of it, but it was a festival pretty early on that I knew the people who put on the festival booked some shows that I wanted to get into. And a lot of people were like, don't pay money to do a festival, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's not worth it, whatever. I was like, well, I still want to do it. So got into this festival. And yeah, for non-comics out there, yeah, it's like a lot of these festivals, we have to pay an entry fee in order to get in. It's not like we're getting money. Most of the time we're paying money to stay at a hotel or whatever. So I did that. I get put on a show that's Sunday at 5 p.m. on the side of a casino. It just was the worst possible spot. And I had another friend on that show who was just like, this sucks. I hate this. Why are we doing this? Just every comic there was complaining, but I was like, you know what? I came here for a reason, and I'm going to do my best set. And with 3 people in the audience, I did the best that I could. Well, after my show, this guy comes up to me. He's like, hey, I'm actually the guy who runs this whole thing, and you were the best one. That was great. Can you do a show tomorrow out in Arizona? And I was like, oh my God, yes, this is why I came here, this guy. So I said yes to that, and I didn't have a car with me, so I was out in another state and did not have a car, and somehow had to get to Arizona tomorrow. And I had driven with some other comedians who had to go back to California. They were like, well, we can't take you. So I called a buddy of mine, told him I'll give you all the money they told me I would make if you just pick me up and drive me to Arizona. And That's what he did. I go out there and I featured for this headliner who I just met. Very nice guy. We had dinner that night. After the show, we talked a lot. He was telling me I did really well, and he thought I was really funny, and that I was super young, and giving me a bunch of advice and all that. Anyways, long story short, several years later, I get this email from this guy, and he said, hey, I don't know if you remember me. We had dinner out in Arizona that time. We did that show. You featured for me. I remembered you were really funny. And I started booking. It's a different guy now. But at the time, he's like, I started booking this thing called DryBar. And I want you to do it.
Wow.
And so he, submitted me to that. And I got in and I did it all because of that stupid festival that I did, where everyone told me not to do it, and everyone sort of phoned it in, and I was the only one who took it seriously and got a lot out of it. I had just recorded my first album before that, and I thought about naming the album that, and I changed the album name at the last second and ended up naming a track on the album, on my album, Skinny Guy. But I really like that name a lot because I was a big Steve Martin fan, and it was sort of an homage to that. And I, when I got asked to do the DryBar, I was like, I know exactly what I'm naming it. The thing I didn't name the album. I know at one point even they made a big deal to all of us that we couldn't even say, "Oh my God," which was sort of like very specific, but okay. And then I think I probably had the same reaction as a lot of comics who are like, okay, weird, but that should be very easy. I won't say, "Oh my God," during my set. And then you do a set to rehearse for it, and you're like, oh wow, I say "oh my God" way more than I thought I did. And I found this two notebooks that of a bunch of short stories that I had written. I had it dated. It was 2010, so it was exactly 10 years old.
Wow.
And I had forgotten about this notebook. I had done, back in college, back in 2010, I had done these series of 30-day challenges with a buddy of mine. And one of them, I challenged myself for 30 days to write a new short story every day. Well, I liked doing it so much. I'd never done something like that before that I ended up filling up two notebooks. I ended up extending past the 30 days and filling up two notebooks. I ended up finding these notebooks and I started reading them. I mean, it'd been 10 years, so I totally forgot about just about every story. And I found myself laughing at a lot of them. And other ones I was like, oh man, I could change this. I could make this a better punchline at the end, and I can rewrite this one. And I started getting ideas for new ones. And so next thing I know, I start typing them out and, fixing them and writing new ones and stuff like that. And yeah, next thing I know, I have close to 50. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with these. It's fun. I'm just kind of bored because we're all at home right now, because of this COVID thing and no one knows what's going on. But I don't know what to do with these 50 short stories. Well, the exact same time, one of my best friends, he showed me this new equipment that he got. He's like a great illustrator, and he showed me that he's like, oh, I got this new thing where I can transfer it all digitally, basically like hand draw stuff and then put it on Instagram or just put it anywhere digitally. And I got to thinking, I was like, you think maybe you could draw something for every one of these short stories and let's write a book?
Wow.
And he's like, well, that sounds cool, but do you know how to write a book? And I was like, no, but it sounds like we got nothing but time right now. Yeah. So I kind of made it my 2020 goal, and it was surprisingly easy. Just a lot of steps. It took a long time. There was a lot of steps to the process, but they weren't, you don't have to be a genius to figure it all out. You just have to be patient, I guess. And that's what I did. And so my buddy and I ended up writing this book, and I was so determined to have it done in 2020 that it was literally like 10 minutes before midnight on December 31st, 2020, that I clicked the button sent the email saying, yes, let's order to have these books ordered and printed or whatever.
Wow.
Which was it was right about the perfect time where I started, things in California started opening back up. And then by May, I was actually out in Florida and back in full swing in 2021 and got to sort of sell these books at shows and stuff like that. And was surprised at how well it was doing and how much people seemed to like it. Well, funny enough, it turned out to be a lot like stand-up. And I think one of the more challenging parts, because I already had a lot of it written, was the editing part and the putting it together. So like a stand-up set where you're just like, okay, that's great. That's a funny joke, or that's a funny short story.
Yeah.
But where's it gonna go? Yeah, it's called A Day at the Zoo in 2062, which is a reference to, it's a reference to one of the short stories that's in it that it just seemed fitting. I don't even think we went through very many titles. It was just like, I know this is the name of one of the stories, but this just seems like this has to be the title for this. His LOL network, he is basically this like influencer guy who hired me and two other comedians to write a show with him that Kevin Hart was producing. Actually, it's called Dead House. But yeah, wrote it. That was a very interesting experience for me in the sense that I knew how to write sketches, and I knew I had written like pilots to things and stuff like that, but never anything super professional. And when they hired me on, I guess like a lot of people in a lot of jobs thought, like I don't feel like I'm qualified for this, but let me fake it, let me pretend like I know what I'm doing, and was surprised at how much I actually knew. I think we constantly get surprised in comedy how many different skills we've learned over the years doing stand-up. We don't think of it as that. We think of it as like, I'm just going to goof off on stage, but you don't realize like how many different skills you're putting into place every time you go up on stage. I would love to get further in acting. I do a lot of like commercial stuff right now.
Right.
Been trying to break into like TV. I would love to do movies. But yeah, trying to push forward more with acting is next on the plate. It's funny, we brought up jazz earlier, and I also use jazz in another comparison with comedy, and that is in a sense of what not to do, because hey, I still like listening to jazz. I still play jazz as like a hobby and all that. So I love jazz, but jazz was mainstream music for a long time, and then it died off. Now it's this like niche thing, and stand-up. There's always that fear that stand-up could end up the same way. That here it's this mainstream art form, and it could die off. I know a lot of comics talk about that all the time. Like, is stand-up dying? Is it a dying art form? It's up to us, and we don't want it to become jazz. We don't want it to die off and become this very specific thing. And I think the reason that jazz did is because it got kind of elitist, and it was an everyman music thing. And then it got kind of, all the musicians were very like, that's not jazz. Don't mess with this very pure music and pure art form. And I think theater did the same thing, where everyone's just trying to emulate Shakespeare still. That it's, theater is a very specific way. And comics sometimes treat stand-up like that, and that stand-up has to be done a certain way, and we can't adapt in any way. But that failure to adapt is what would kill stand-up if it's going to die off. So you have to adapt. You have to be able to change it up and stop taking things so seriously with stand-up. We're just trying to make a crowd laugh and try to say what we want to say, and sometimes that might mean doing it in a new way.
I gotta go now.